Alright everyone, welcome to this video. In this video I'm going to talk about Book 4 of Paradise Lost. Of all the books in Paradise Lost, Book 4 might have the most going on as far as action and what all is being introduced and all of this good stuff. So let's get straight to it. So the first part of Book 4 of Paradise Lost deals with Satan first entering into the Garden of Eden for the first time. And Satan, as he enters the Garden of Eden, gives this another great speech. Unlike in Book 1 of Paradise Lost, where Satan is kind of giving a performance. He's giving a performance to the other fallen angels, trying to be their leader, trying to rally the troops. In this book of Paradise Lost, this is where we get the true Satan. Right? This is where we kind of get his inward thoughts about everything that's happened with this rebellion. And we get that he's almost just kid with daddy issues. Right? He's this boy with deep-seated father issues. I don't know if you guys have watched the TV show Lucifer, but it plays on this idea from Paradise Lost of the devil with issues. But for the first 100 or 150 lines or so, this is where we get Satan kind of coming to terms with who he is and what his purpose in his existence even is now. So there's lots going on in this passage. It's much too long for me to read the whole thing, but just to offer you some lines from it. He asks himself, okay, what did I do wrong? Can I go back again? Can I go home to heaven again? Can I ask God for forgiveness? He says, I fell, how glorious once above thy sphere, till pride and worse ambition threw me down warring in heaven against heaven's matchless king. Wherefore? He deserved to know such return from me, whom he created, what I was in that bright eminence. And with his good upbraided none, nor was his service hard. What could he be less than to afford him praise, the easiest recompense, and pay him thanks? How do? Yet all his good proved ill in me, and wrought but malice, lifted up so high, eyes disdained subjection, and thought one step higher would set me highest, and in a moment quit the debt immense of endless gratitude, so burdensome, still paying, still to owe, forgetful what from him I still received, and understood not that a grateful mind by owing owes not, but still pays at once, indebted and discharged. What burden then? So, he says there, okay, my service in heaven wasn't even hard. How hard was it to actually just sit around and worship God? Was it really that hard? No. But I'm prideful, right? I was the brightest angel. Why should I have to sit around and worship my Creator all the time? Isn't that kind of weird? Right? Why does God demand such adoration from his creations? So we get a little bit there as far as his character goes. He also says that no matter, again, going back to my lecture on Book 1, no matter which way where he is, he's always in hell. So even when he's on earth looking at God's new creation of Eden and mankind and the earth, he's always in hell now. Around line 70-ish, he says, which way shall I fly, infinite wrath and infinite despair? Which way I fly is hell. Myself am hell, and in the lowest deep a lower deep, still threatening to devour me, opens wide, to which the hell I suffer seems a heaven. Oh, then at last relent. Is there no place left for repentance? None for pardon left? None left but by submission, and that word disdain forbids me. And my dread of shame among the spirits beneath, whom I seduced with other promises and other vaunts, than to submit, boasting I could subdue the omnipotent. Ah me, they little know how dearly I abide that boast so vain, under what torments inwardly I groan, while they adore me on the throne of hell with diadem and scepter high advanced, the lower still I fall, only supreme in misery, such joy ambition finds. So Satan here is saying, okay, yeah, sure, I'm the king of hell. That whole thing about better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, that was kind of BS, right? You know, I'm the king of misery, right? I'm the king. If I had it to do over again, I probably would, right? Just because I can't stand to be a subject. I can't stand to be a subject to a tyrant. You know, but at the same time, I'm now the king of a flock of losers, right? You know, is it better to be the king of a flock of losers or to be, you know, the number one angel in heaven? So he asks this question here too. He ends the passage pretty close to line 95-ish. He says, what feigned submission swore, ease would recant, vows made in vain, as violent and void. For never can true reconcilement grow, where wounds of deadly hate have pierced so deep, which would but lead me to a worse relapse and heavier fall. So should I purchase dear short intermission, bought with double smart. This knows my punisher. Therefore, as far from granting he, as I from begging peace, all hope excluded thus. Behold, instead of us outcast, exiled, his new delight, mankind created, and with hope, farewell fear, farewell remorse. All good to me is lost, evil be thou my good. By thee at least divided empire with heaven's king I hold by thee, and more than half perhaps will reign, as man ere long in this new world shall know. And then after that we get this passage where it talks about how his new emotions dims the light from his face even more. Right? So his light just keeps getting dimmer and darker. So again, he could ask God for forgiveness. Maybe God would give it to him. But now this wound of deadly hate has pierced so deep that he can never recover from it. His heart can never get past, this incident. So again, God in book 3 might have been right? Sufficient to have stood, though free to fall. He freely made the choice to fall, and there's no coming back from it. Whereas mankind did not freely make the choice to fall, but was instead duped. So mankind can come back from it. So that's a little bit about Satan here in book 4. He comes back close to the end. Well, he comes back in 2 different parts. One is when he first sees Eve, right? And the other is when he's trying to escape the garden in the end of book 4 and has his sort of standoff with Gabriel, the archangel Gabriel, in the garden. And that's an interesting scene too. There's so much to cover with book 4. We have the idea of Eden. Eden in Paradise Lost is its own character, even more, just as much so as Adam and Eve. Right? Eden in Paradise Lost is this place much unlike nature today. Right? They call this term Pre-Lapsarian. That's Eden before the fall of man, versus Post-Lapsarian, which is Eden after the fall of man. The Eden that Milton describes in Book 4 of Paradise Lost is this sort of pre-Lapsarian Eden. So in Milton's Eden, we have these wilds, right? These gardens that are growing wildly, right? It's actually Adam and Eve's job in the garden to sort of cultivate it, to make sure it doesn't grow out of control. It's this wonderful place where, all these beautiful flowers are blooming. Animals actually get along in Eden, right? The lion and the lamb both sort of lay side by side. The snake. The snake is a character that we will be coming back to, but even the snake in Eden doesn't even sort of walk around, isn't on its belly yet, because lying on its belly is later its punishment for its crime of being seduced, of being possessed by Satan. Even the serpent it has a cunning in nature, right? But even the serpent is still innocent within this Garden of Eden. Anytime we look at something we haven't talked about in literature much yet, but it's this whole idea of this Eden comes from the pastoral tradition. There's a great tradition in Western literature to look at the landscape, to look at farming, to look at the life of a farmer or a shepherd, and sort of idolize it in poems and in songs. This is exactly what's happening here in Book 4 of Paradise Lost with this Garden of Eden. Once Satan sees it, he gets even more envious, right? Because of the beauty and majesty of it all. But in Book 4, we're also introduced to Adam and Eve. Okay, and this Adam and Eve's characterization and their introductions in Book 4 are critical to understanding the text. I'm only having you guys read Books 1 through 4 and then 9 to 10. Books 5 and 6 are kind of the flashbacks to the war in heaven. Books 7 and 8 are kind of theological tracks of a sort. Book 9 and 10 is where we actually get the fall of man. So Book 4 is the only place where we get true sort of character development happening as far as what's going on with them. So the question here is again raised, especially with Eve. Did God set Eve up to fail? Later in Paradise Lost, it's revealed that, Adam asked God for a mate because he felt lonely within the garden. But in this passage, he gives sort of their first character traits. So around line 300-ish of Book 4, again, it depends on your edition what the exact line is. He says, he's describing them both. He describes Adam as being in naked majesty seemed Lord of all, and worthy seemed for in their looks divine the image of their glorious Maker shown. Truth, wisdom, sanctitude, severe and pure, severe but in true filial freedom placed, whence true authority in men, though both not equal as their sex not equal seemed. For contemplation he in valor formed, for softness she in sweet attractive grace. He for God only, she for God and him. His fair large front and eye sublime declared absolute rule, and hyacinthine locks round from his parted forelock manly hung, clustering, but not beneath his shoulders broad. She is veiled down to the slender waist, her unadored golden tresses wore dishevelled, but in wanton ringlets waved as the vine curls her tendrils, which implied subjection, but required with gentle sway, and by her yielded, by him best received, yielded with coy submission, modest pride, and sweet reluctant amorous delay. So that passage goes on, but this is Milton saying, hey, Adam's in charge here, Eve's the sort of subservient one. Something that's extremely interesting here is the question, was Eve especially set up to fall? Right? Adam's the one she convinces Adam to fall, as we will find out. So is it Eve's fault that she fell, or is it her own inner nature that causes her to fall by Satan's guile? This is brought up around line 450. She talks about when she was first created, and the first moments that she remembers after her creation. She says, I first awaked and found myself reposed under a shade on flowers, much wondering where and what I was. Whence thither brought and how, not distant far from thence, a murmuring sound of waters issued from a cave and spread into a liquid plain. Then stood unmoved, pure as the expanse of heaven. I thither went with unexperienced thought, and laid me down on the green bank, to look into the clear, smooth lake, that to me seemed another sky. As I bent down to look, just opposite a shape within the watery gloom appeared, bending to look on me. I started back, it started back, but pleased I soon returned. Pleased it returned as soon with answering looks of sympathy and love. There I had fixed mine eyes till now, and pined with vain desire, had not a voice thus warned me. What there thou seest, fair creature, is thyself. With thee it can and goes, but follow me, and I will bring thee where no shadow stays thy coming, and thy soft embraces. He whose image thou art, him thou shalt enjoy inseparably thine. To him shalt bear multitudes like thyself, and thence be called mother of human race. What could I do but follow straight, invisibly thus led, till I espied thee, fair indeed and tall, under a platon, yet methought less fair, less winning soft, less amiably mild, than that smooth, watery image. Back I turned, then falling, cried aloud, Return, fair Eve! Whom fliest thou? Whom thou fliest, of him thou art. His flesh, his bone, to give thee being, I lent out of my side to thee, nearest my heart's substantial life. To have thee by my side, henceforth an individual solace dear, part of my soul I seek thee, and thee claim my other half. With that thy gentle hand seized mine, I yielded, and from that time see how beauty is excelled by manly grace and wisdom, which alone is truly fair. So this story is interesting because it echoes Greek mythology and the story of Narcissus from Greek mythology. And of course, this is where the term narcissism comes from, right? Narcissus in Greek mythology falls in love with her own reflection, right? And which causes lots of dire consequences. Milton makes Eve fall in love with her own reflections, right? She falls in love with her own beauty and majesty. When she sees Adam, she's like, "Oh my God, who is this? It's not as this guy is not as beautiful as who I just saw in the lake." So it's setting Eve up. It almost gives her this trait of vanity, right? She's created almost with this trait of vanity. So again, Is it her fault that she's created with this trait? Is she naturally vain? Was she created this way, or does she choose to be vain? Well, her very first thought on earth was how beautiful she thinks she is. So, you can make your own mind up there. But once we get to book 9 of Paradise Lost, Eve's vanity is what Satan most appeals to. Right? He appeals to her vanity and her love for herself to get her to fall and eat the apple. So I wanted to draw your attention to that passage especially as a talking point. Beyond that, we get Satan's standoff with Gabriel pretty close to the end of the book. And Satan kind of retreats, right? So he doesn't fight Gabriel, he retreats. So again, we're sort of getting this idea of Satan becoming more and more pathetic the further we go through the text. So this is the last part of Paradise Lost that you're going to get until books 9 and 10. If you ever get the chance on your own time, read books 5 and 6 especially, because they're fun. They talk about the war in heaven and Satan's fall. Books 7 and 8, like I said, are a bit slower. Books 11 and 12, unless you really love Paradise Lost, you can probably stay away from those. Except the very end of book 12, where they leave the garden. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope it helped illuminate the text for you. Hopefully I helped plant eyes so that you could see the deep meaning of this text. Right? So, not to be corny. So, but see you guys next time. Take care. Enjoy the rest of Paradise Lost.